Welcome to episode 14 of Security Matters with the Coffee Squad. Today we are going to be talking about riot responses, and it's just me and Jake once again because Ray is still making his videos.
Yeah, I think Ray's recovering. Yeah,
Recovering.
I think he pulled a hamstring or something.
Could
So,
be. Yeah,
uh,
once you get to our age, it's not quite as spry as we used to be.
whoa! Our age? What are you talking about here, Will? You don't see any gray in this beard like you do in yours and Ray's.
Just because you keep it short.
I'm, my point is still valid. You don't see any gray in this beard. So, uh, yeah, Ray's probably gonna listen to this and put some just for a minute in there for next
Probably.
time.
Yeah. Well, he
So,
calls it, what did he? I can't remember what he said he has. It's distinguished.
yeah. Well, cool. So for everyone listening today, we are talking about riots and riots response, and kind of differentiating just how riots are, and they're kind of a unique phenomenon out there, and there's different types of riots. So uh, interesting subject, given the chaos in the world around us. I feel like we're living in close to Armageddon. Will
It does
you
feel
know
like it
you,
sometimes.
we had a plague, still have a plague. You got the murder hornets.
Those went away quick, though. You don't hear about them.
And now we have um, rioting, protesting. Yeah, so the U.S. just seems like it's on fire right now. So interesting, somewhat scary time to be alive right now. So I'm sure, like everything, we'll make it out just fine. But yeah, just so I think for our listeners who've been with us from the beginning, uh, been interesting a few months. So let's keep it classy and let's keep it interesting today.
Yep,
So
that's right.
yeah, that's a little Ron Burgundy quote there for some people there. So what are you drinking? Actually,
Uh,
I'm sorry, I kind of jumped the gun. I know for some people we always like to kind of give them a little rundown on what we do and how this podcast goes. So Will, do you want to just jump into that real quick so we get for the new listeners so they don't think we're jumping all over the place like we normally
sure.
do?
So we're gonna start off with what we're drinking because usually me, Ray, and myself, we were kind of caught. Well, I'm a coffee connoisseur. He drinks whatever he can squeeze out of some store, and then Jake will have some sort of fluffy H2O hybrid with maybe some herbal essence type stuff. And then we'll move on to questions of the week, and then I have discuss a couple security related articles of the week, and then we go ahead and move into our main topic, which, like we talked about earlier, is going to be the riots. So, Jake, what kind of water are you drinking this morning?
So I was out in the sun quite a bit yesterday, uh, pretty much all day. I'm feeling the effects of it. So my typical water, nothing great, nothing fancy today. Just some good old H2O. So yeah, it's funny. We've said this before. We call it the Coffee Squad, and Will is really only the coffee drinker. And I think Will, you actually did come up with a name. So kudos to you because I'm not very creative. So um, Ray is very creative, and you guys both drink coffee. So great name. You just have one person on here who does not drink coffee. So what are you drinking? What's this fine roaster
so,
you are?
so you're gonna love this one today, right? It's a Guatemalan natural Ayarza wine series micro lot from one of my local roasteries here, and it's a light roast with a it's a light roast with a berry, floral, hazelnut tasting notes, and it is delicious.
I know you read all that.
I
Just
did
so you
because I
know,
can't
I
remember now.
know you read all that. Like Will, you're supposed to be this coffee connoisseur. I've never gone to like a winery and seen, the person who's describing the wine. You know what? I take that back. I have seen them read off a card. I'm not a wine drinker either, so but I have
Oh
been to
man,
wineries before. I find them fascinating. Just like coffee, I think doing a lot of trips down to Central and South America, I find coffee interesting. I actually did like a coffee horsebacking riding trip there in the mountains of Peru. Pretty cool, pretty interesting. So there you go, guys. Will is drinking some. I don't even know how to describe it. Some righteous coffee drink this morning. So
yeah.
awesome, awesome. So before we dive in too deep and have this pretty serious conversation, um, question for you. A little bummed. I'm a huge sports fan. Huge.
Me too.
And so with COVID going on, I would say that's one thing I miss the most. I think I said that a few weeks ago. Is I miss my sports. I don't. I'm not a big follower of tennis, but even if they had like live tennis going on right now, I would watch it. I'm not a NASCAR fan. Will, are you a NASCAR fan?
No, I'm not.
I don't mind watching it, but that's about the only thing on right now. And watching cars and trucks go in circles and circles is great. My boys, they only want to watch it when there's a crash. And to be quite honest with you, I am the exact same way.
Yeah,
So,
that's what everybody likes is the crashes. So
so
most people.
yeah, I mean, my brother-in-law is, Kozlowski this and this guy that Jeff Gordon. Who is that? Like
Yeah,
I know the names, I know the race car drivers. I don't know their numbers of the cars, but you have some people who are, Ford team enthusiasts, Chevy team enthusiasts. But my point being, NASCAR is great now, and I'm glad NASCAR has gotten back. I know another Major League Fishing. I'm not a huge bass fisherman. I do enjoy fishing. I grew up fishing as a kid, not for bass, but for other stuff. And Major League Fishing, if you haven't watched it, I've gotten acquainted with it here, and it is quite entertaining. So it's a different style of a bass tournament. So that's another great thing right now. But man, I miss baseball. Right now, miss the NBA season. We definitely miss March Madness, which
yeah.
I absolutely love. So, college footballs and NFL teams are, should be starting to get back right now, but you're not hearing that. I remember turning on ESPN the other day and watching a cornhole championship. I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Like
That's
Johnson's old
like
cornhole. Yep.
that's like curling in the Olympics. I'm sure the Greek gods back in the day were like, you know what? We're gonna have these 300 pounder guys who can look like they're gonna have a heart attack. We're gonna have curling in the Olympics. Yeah, yeah. So back to the question here. Now that I totally went off on a rant.
On a Ray rant.
Yes. So maybe Ray would be proud of me. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But when do you think professional sports are going to make a comeback? You think they're going to make a comeback this summer?
I think NBA is done. I know they've talked about maybe doing a tournament style only for the championship. So they're probably, and I think hockey's talking about doing the same thing. I don't think
Yeah.
anything's finalized. Baseball just rejected the counteroffer from the union, so who knows if they're ever going to come back this year. I'm sure they'll have something in the fall. That's what everybody's kind of shooting for is the fall. The NFL has announced that they're going to let people start their training camps, but it has to be at the facilities where, I know like Charlotte, the Panthers would go down to Spartanburg for their training, but I don't think they're going to be allowed to do that this year. It has to be on their own
Yeah.
site. I like soccer, football for, everybody in Europe.
And South
I like
America,
and South America. I enjoy that.
your
So
wife's
I've
going
been
to slap
watching.
you.
Nah, she doesn't follow it. So I've been following I like the Bundesliga. So I've been watching the Bundesliga the last couple of weeks. It's weird not having the people in the stands. It's
Yeah.
eerily quiet, but I don't mind that. The Premier League's talked about going back up, starting up here pretty soon. So it's slowly but surely coming back, but I'm a big football fan. That's kind of like my wheelhouse. And so I'm hoping. I know like the Pac-12, they're talking about starting next month, either the end of this month or early next month, allowing the student athletes back on campus to start doing some training, but there's going to have a whole bunch of protocols and keep them isolated from other people. So I think it'll come back. There's just going to be a lot of changes.
So I've got a question for you. I haven't watched, and I will start watching soccer because I actually do enjoy watching soccer. I lived in Spain for a number of years uh, as a teenager, and um, got a question for you on the Bundesliga soccer matches. Do the commentators yell "goal" right now, even though there's no fans?
Yeah, but it's not as dramatic as the South Americans and stuff.
Yeah,
That South American they say goal for like 20 minutes,
yeah, and like ten
and
different times,
so
10 different ways.
yeah,
It's awesome. I love it.
I do too. It
Yeah,
gets you hyped up.
hell
It's
yeah,
just it's funny watching European soccer and then South American or Latin American soccer and even American soccer. We have a lot of most of the commentators are either going to be you're going to have one natural American usually, and then one either European or South American Latino with them to kind of
yeah,
spice it up. It seems like so. It's I mean they're
yeah. So
very passionate about their football.
So
Football.
I wonder now, you brought up the point that everyone's trying to, all the different leagues are pushing for a comeback in fall. So for all the men out there, right, who have, the married men out there who, have their little honeydew list, right? You've had plenty of time to knock that crap out. So if not, you still have some grace period time, right? It falls just another few months away. So you got roughly 6 months between COVID happening and knocking out your honeydew list. I wonder if you're going to have just like every station, for the most part, if all, Major League Baseball, the NFL, college football, and the NBA kicking off. I know we have a real small period of time in like late October, early November, when all these are kind of kicking off.
Yep.
But if they're all going to do something, I wonder if it's just the TV stations are going to be packed, and then, start prepping your wives. I know now that you said that, I'm going to start prepping. My wife hates sports. I'm going to start prepping her of, hey, this is what's to come. So don't expect me.
It's going to be weeks and weeks of me sitting on the couch watching sports. Just leave me alone.
That dad bod's going to be completely gone. It's just going to be a marshmallow bod. By the
From
time
the COVID 15 to the sports 20.
Yeah, sports 30. So, with all the beer and everything. So yeah, it's going to be great if that happens. I'm looking forward to it. So, and then let's have another little question that we started doing, I think, a little last week. It's just something that's a little off topic, but kind of good sometimes. Kind of get to know us and our personalities maybe a little more. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, Will?
I would say that the best piece of advice I've ever received is to learn something new every day. Never stop learning. Always seek out something new to learn. Always better yourself. So, what about
Nice.
you?
Change your underwear every day. No.
You have to be told to do that, Jake. Your poor wife.
Yeah. Hey, I was trying to save on laundry.
Too much time in country. You're flipping them inside out, back and forth. Yeah, I know how it is.
So I think stay humble. No matter what you achieve or lack to achieve, just stay humble. And at times I haven't always been the most humble person. So I've had some humbling experiences in my life, but yeah, stay humble. So cool. All right, let's jump into these news articles real quick. So what do you got, Will?
So the first one that I found is talking about how more than 30% of employees' accounts worldwide compromised since the start of remote working. And it's just talking about how the U.S. is especially bad for it. The people in the U.S. are higher than all the other countries they surveyed when it comes to using their work devices for personal use, using their work account for socializing, like a Zoom room and stuff like that. And also, what's kind of scary is that U.S. workers, 45%, are 3 times as likely to have given their password to their child or spouse compared to other countries. And then over 60% of U.S. workers have admitted to having an online account compromised since starting to work remotely, which is a lot. 60% is over half, right? And that's more than 2 times the global average. And then 10% of them didn't change their password after it was done, which is crazy. So
that's staggering, honestly.
Yeah. And it goes back to your training at the companies, what they should be, the policies, procedures, and training that they should implement, which is why this is a kind of a new world, but they should have had something in place, or by now they should have had something in place, like some policies and procedures to follow. So what about you? What kind of...
So I kind of took it a different direction this week with all the negative and bad news and like that dark, stormy gray cloud, maybe with little lightning bolts striking around whenever you turn on the news right now. I look for a kind of a good news story, a feel-good story. Here is my feel-good story. I thought it was actually kind of cool. So South Korea heard that the Navajo Nation was experiencing high COVID numbers, equally or higher than New York City. And so they donated 10,000 masks and other PPE equipment to the Navajo Nation for thanking them for their service to South Korea. I didn't know this until I read the story. World War II, we had code talkers, Navajo code talkers in the Asia Pacific campaign. They were also used in South Korea, about 700 of them. and so there's about
Wow.
140 of them still alive today. And so the South Koreans just spent 70 years wanting to say thank you for their service and that they still remember. And they donated a mask and PPE to the Navajo Nation. So what a
Oh, that's
great
really
gesture!
cool.
What a
Yep.
great feel good story. And hopefully we see more, these kind good gestures instead of all the negativity that's out there. So I think negativity just breeds more negativity,
It does, and it
and we're
spreads
seeing that right
faster,
now.
unfortunately.
Yeah. So pretty good, pretty good. So let's jump in this topic this week.
Okay.
Let's go in there pretty deep. Um, everyone has reasons. Right now we're seeing, the political stances on the riots and the protests going on, and we're going to try and steer far and clear from that. We're just going to talk
Yeah.
about riots and safety and security as a person, as a business, and most people think that riots, are pretty cut and dry. There's just one type of riots, and we were just talking about sports. Um, so there's four types of riots. So there's your celebratory response type riots, right? You're celebrating something. We can think of, you
Stanley
know,
Cup, NBA, and March Madness, national
yeah,
championship. Yeah.
yep. So we see those, I think, every city here in the U.S. and around the world. You have the Champions League there in Europe. Whenever whoever wins
Yep.
that, that city is
World
bracing
Cup.
for,
Yep.
yeah, for those riots. So uh, another type of riot is that spontaneous type riot, and that's usually due to some type of controversial event, and that's what we're seeing today. Um, very they're common, probably one of the more common type riots that happen. The other type of riot is organized riots in continuation of a spontaneous riot.
Which I
Um,
say that's what we're falling in more now. Now that we're
absolutely,
going on day 9, I think it is. So
yeah.
day 9 or
Uh,
10.
and you can look at these riots as like your G8 summits, your international type major summits when different countries are coming together. So, and then your final type of riot are your organized riots. Riots that are organized type protests. And again, I think those kind of fall in line as well. So they have some type, they have a backing, they have leadership involved. So just like anything else that's organized, they have um, all that backing and they're prepared for it. And these are the
Yep.
ones that law enforcement agencies should be most prepared for. Um, so and probably harder to contain
Yep.
uh, and deal with just because of that planning on the opposite side there. So um, little quick bit of information there on what the different types of rioting
Mhm.
are for those who didn't know. So
Well, I think it's
um,
important to distinguish between riots and protests because a lot of people get those. They kind of think they're the same thing, and they're not. I mean, most protests are peaceful. They might get loud, but they're not. There's no sort of violence. They're more organized. And where riots tend to involve violence and destruction, right? So that's
absolutely, and I think I mean I am all for a protest. I
yeah.
think
Oh yeah.
most, it's born and shaped into our American blood.
Yep.
Um, a protest is um, it's part of that First Amendment right, and
Yep.
so I, I I don't care what the cause is, or even if I don't agree with the cause, protest. Um, if you think it's going to make a change, even if you don't think it's going to make a
Yeah.
change, you just want your voice heard, get out there and protest. But once you cross that line with violence and destroying stuff, that's where it turns into a riot. So, and you have a large group of people doing it. So it's big difference between the two. So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and we're going to talk, today, not just riots but protests. Protests that change can happen from a protest to a riot really quick with
Yep.
instigators.
Just need one spark. Yep.
I mean, people's emotions are high, and you're hearing a lot of the term agitators right now in the news, but that's what it is,
Hmm.
and that could be on either side. You could have
Oh
the
yeah.
side that's
Definitely.
controlling the law enforcement, the security type side, who's trying to contain the protests, and then the opposite side too, where the opposing side, not that they're in opposition to each other, but the opposite side having the agitator there as well, and it takes just one wrong move, one wrong statement, something to turn that peaceful protest into complete and utter chaos.
Yep.
So, as a police officer, former police officer, Will, what were you ever involved in a protest or a riot?
I mean, the closest thing I'd say is we had a shots fired a fight call at a nightclub, one of our local nightclubs, and it turned into a huge mess. People like all the people spilling out into the parking lot and fighting, and it was, and then they started kind of turning it on to police officers. But I mean, I wouldn't consider it a riot; it's just more of a disobedient gathering, I guess you could say, and
Yeah.
had to disperse some tear gas and everybody went home, arrested the ones that were shooting and fighting. And it wasn't bad for us. We were able to handle it quickly and took care of business. So,
Yeah.
and like I said, that was more, I think, of a fight spilling over and then becoming disobedient type or
Yeah.
disruptiveness, right? So
I you look at the COVID protests, that were happening around the country for a little while. Protesting. People want to make sure that the governments, state and local governments were, and even federal, were hearing, what they thought were their rights. Whether it was, hey, continue the lockdown or lift the lockdown. Some of those, I'd say, majority of those were peaceful. I know the one in Raleigh, North Carolina. It didn't turn out so peaceful. There's 3 or 4 people that got arrested about a month or so ago
yeah.
because they started to do damage to the property. So there's, there's a great example right there of, a peaceful protest where a handful of people just took it a little too far, and the cops, I thought, did a great job. They, detained them and took them away. So it's scary. So let's talk about how can you stay safe. And I want our listeners and viewers to think, not just here in the U.S. Riots are
Everywhere.
and protests are happening everywhere. If
Yep.
you open up the global page right now, you can read about them happening in Israel right now. When I lived in Spain as a 19, 20-year-old kid, there was protests, riots happening in Madrid, um, and at times as a young kid, uh, they got scary. I mean, I
Hmm.
remember, city buses being tipped over and set on fire. So uh, they can, they turn fast and they turn quick, and it's actually it's downright just scary because you're powerless, and there's nothing you can do really to do it except for, in my opinion, get out of the situation. Yeah,
Well, I know one of the young men that works for us in our small business. He was talking about going to one of the local protests, but he was apprehensive because of all the protests that are violent around the country, and he ended up not going because he didn't want to put himself in that situation. And I think that's kind of the first step. That if you're not prepared to be in that situation, don't put yourself in that situation.
yeah. And
Stay
I mean,
away.
and some people just inadvertently
Yeah.
are you could be passing through town. You could be driving. So let's say you're
Mhm.
traveling, right? You're traveling whether here in the U.S. or in a foreign country.
Yeah.
You're using the highway system, and that passes through a major city. Most of these protests um, and slash riots happen in and around major population centers. You could be driving through and they block the road.
Yep.
What do you do? You know.
So I mean, are you asking me? I mean, because I
Well,
I would
both.
say,
It
I
was
mean,
kind of a question for
rhetorical
you,
question. Yeah, I got
and
it.
for
But
people to think of.
so our suggestion now, this is a way, it's not the way. So just know that this is just how maybe we would handle it, but it's not necessarily saying it's the right way or the wrong way. It's just a way. But you come up to you're driving and they start blocking the road. Get off that road. Turn around if you have to. Find a fast avenue of escape and get out of there. Don't sit there. But now, if you can, if you're trapped, I know I've read things where they're saying, just lock your car doors. Don't be aggressive, and just wait for it to pass. I guess if that's what you have to do, you have to do it. I mean, at a certain point, if you fear for your life, I guess you're going to do what you got to do, right? So,
Yeah, and I think a lot of our listeners, they hear us talk about planning, 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 right? And prepare, prepare, prepare. But that's really what security is. Whether it's personal security for yourself and your family and your loved ones, or professional security for your business and corporations, you got to be prepared. I know uh, right now with social media, I'll tell you, I live in a small, sleepy little golf town here in North Carolina, and it's uh, very, very. I think it's rated top five safest cities in North Carolina,
Yeah.
and social media message came out Sunday afternoon. Hey, plan riot slash protest at the little local Walmart. Um, the old army guy in me is like, oh man, I want to go check this out, right? uh, so, but the point is, social media put it out there that hey, there's a potential of something happening here. Just stay away. If you want to go be part of a protest, go be part of it. But also know what that protest is about. Know who's going to be there, and also research of what do these protests look like in the past, and where have they gone wrong, and be prepared.
Have a plan for when something does go wrong.
And then definitely when you're there, check out your surroundings. Where can you leave? Where can you get out? Are you boxed in? Or do you want to be at the front and center of it, or do you want to be? You can participate off on the side. So if something does go wrong, you can make that little U-turn on your feet or your bike, skateboard, your car, whatever, and get that out of there as fast as you can.
Well, see, one of the things when I was researching the subject, so I just have a little more knowledge on the subject to talk about. One of the things that one of the articles I read suggested was that if you do find yourself in a protest, excuse me, or a riot, and you don't want to be out of there, or you're nervous about it or whatever, stay to the fringe sides on the outskirts of it instead of getting in the middle. That way you have a better chance of escaping if you need to, or hanging back and not being noticed. If that makes sense. So
Yeah. And I think you can, look at body language and you can
Yep.
get a feeling of the crowd, not just the crowd, but the security that's there in place, whether it's, a hired security company there just to protect that business or wherever you're doing that protest at, or, the police. I would say most of the time, organized protests have to pull a permit.
Yep.
And police are going to be there at least observing. And nowadays, especially in the U.S., you're going to have two sides to every protest. One side's going to want their way, the other side's going to want their voices heard too, and that causes tension. Tension, can cause violence.
And then depending on what you're protesting, there might be a counter protest, so that ends up being a third party there.
Yeah.
And,
So
and you go back to the body language you're talking about, and paying attention to your surroundings. If you're at a protest and you're protesting X and everybody's, dressed a certain way with their signs and stuff, and all of a sudden you see two or three people come dressed totally opposite or different with masks on their face and like backpacks and big puffy jackets on, and it's 100 degrees outside, that right there tells you, oh, these guys might be up to something no good. Maybe it's time to start checking for avenues of escape and backing off for what we're doing.
I almost just did a COVID joke, but then I stopped myself, figuring it's not the time. So, but yeah, and honestly, let's COVID is real. It's still going around, and so here in the U.S., globally, so having the mask on and everything else,
I still don't like the mask. I mean, I know it, but it's just ingrained in me from them being in the police officer so long. When you see somebody walk into a store with a mask on, you're like, oh, I mean, my senses are heightened. I just, it still bothers me. And that's just because of, I guess, what I did. So,
and yeah, it's breaking down those barriers, right? And it goes against, for law enforcement right now of, I've seen these protests, these riots now happening with people with a mask and a weapon, So that goes against everything that you ever been told in the concealed carry type course too. So,
Yep.
but so going back to the people, body language, crowd, once you get that feeling of things are starting to go a little south, suggest definitely it's time to leave. It's not time to be a tough guy. It's easier to walk away from a fight than pick a fight or instigate a fight. It's so easy just to walk away. So that's definitely our recommendation is once that the tensions are starting to rise, it's time to leave. Um, Bad things are only going to happen from there on out. So any you know anything else, Will, from your police background that you could think of for our listeners to from your side, from your point of view, from the training that you guys train with dealing with protests that you guys either look for or how you deal with them too. I think that'd be interesting.
Well, I mean, every department's different, every state's different, but I know most of them, well, everyone I've ever talked to, you're more into a reactive than a proactive type approach, which is strange for a lot of police, because you're out there trying to stop crime, being proactive, and this one you're more reactive there in case something does happen. Um, you're always looking for the agitators, the ones who are causing the trouble. You're scanning the crowds, looking for the crowds. A lot of the bigger, especially the bigger municipalities, are going to have undercover officers in the crowd and with the protesters, trying to find out where the ones who are causing the trouble or potential to cause the trouble are at. And that's kind of what you're looking for, right? Even when you're on the line, you're just sitting there, you're watching the whole time to see where's the threat coming from, where's the possible danger coming from. And not only against the police officers, but against anybody else who's there too, because they're not there just for themselves and the businesses, they're also there for the people's safety that are actually there too. And that's what I think gets lost a lot of times, because it's a us versus them mentality.
No, I mean, we're talking a lot mainly, I think, right now of the political side of protest.
Yeah.
Going back to our first point of protest, the spontaneity of a sporting type event. Again, I've gone to numerous Real Madrid, Barcelona games when I lived in Spain, in Madrid. I would say that at the time, that was the biggest rivalry in Spanish League soccer. And even some of the other teams that they would play, the Spanish police would be out there, in riot gear. Fences were up. I mean, there were stabbings going on in the metro stations. Dumpsters, garbage cans being set fire within the stadium. It makes American football fans, like your Raider fans, and I am from Northern California. Not a Raiders fan, by the way, a Niners fan. But
a little bit in my mouth. Sorry.
It's probably that horrible coffee you're drinking.
It's talking to a Niners.
So, but I mean, European soccer, just soccer fans in general, they're nuts. When you get a passionate soccer fan, my gosh, they're nuts. I mean, I've been to a UK game too. I mean, they are nuts. You want to talk about fights and fist fights and breaking out? I think the Dodgers, San Francisco Giants fans are starting to get there a little bit, but they're still in like Pee Wee League compared to soccer fans.
This rivalry's been going on for hundreds of years.
And family members you're disowned if you root for the opposite team. Like pack your bags, get out. I don't care if you're 2 years old. If your father's a Real Madrid fan and you're a kid and you're rooting for Barcelona, it doesn't matter at what age, man. They're throwing you out. Yep. So the point being is, the police there, I mean, they had formed human shield walls to protect the two different fans from literally tearing each other's heads off. Oh, yeah. And so there's a form there of, the police literally, they're there to protect the fan. And I can't tell you how many times I saw, these fights breaking out and the cops just literally getting in the middle of it, breaking up the fights. They didn't detain them. I think in Spain, they're kind of used to it, just, push them to the side and like, hey, get out of here. Now, probably if they dealt with them again, I didn't stick around long enough for it. But
a lot of times when you start arresting people, you're going to cause more trouble. So you're kind of saying, unless it's a felony, just kind of get them out of there and do their own thing, that type of thing.
So again, and I think this, when you're traveling globally, I think the same rules apply. Look on social media. You may have to learn it in another language, but look at social media, read the news, read what's going on, stay abreast of current situations, not only politically but also socially. And how that
goes back to research. We're always talking about research, knowing where you're going, knowing your surroundings, and that goes back to that. If you're traveling to Spain during the running of the bulls, and you don't want to be caught up in that, and then I think it's Spain, right? Is it Spain running the bulls? Yeah. So you go there during that time, and you don't want to be there, so make sure if you're going to, I don't know where the G8 summit was supposed to be at this year. Do you know? France? Was it Paris?
I can't remember.
But if you don't want to be caught up in one of those geopolitical protest type things, know where you're going, know when that stuff's going on. Like the RNC convention in Charlotte this year. If you don't want to be caught up in the counter protest down there, don't go to Charlotte during that time.
Yeah. I mean, so I mean, Will's making some great points, right? And realistic type points. So know before you plan, before you go, do a little bit of research. And then also look at what happens if there is, where's the closest hospital? Where's the closest safe spot? How do you get out of there? What modes of transportation are available? If the metro type system, if that gets shut down, what are you going to do? I know a lot of these major large cities, especially in Europe, they rely heavily on the metro system and public transportation. If that gets shut down, how are you going to travel? So just little bits of information. Where's the closest clinic? What's that clinic rated at?
If you're overseas, where's your embassy?
Yeah, or consulate, and then what are their hours? There's always someone at the embassy, but what are their hours too of a consulate if there isn't an embassy? Most consulates work business type hours. So who do you call? Do you have that embassy phone number handy? And if you do call that, who are you going to get? Usually it's a local person who's going to answer that phone.
I almost made a Ghostbusters joke, but I'm behaving myself. So
you should have, but it's all these little things that, Will and I we're talking about, we're pointing out that you need to know, and then not just as a person, but as a company. If you are the chief security officer of a company, or just in the security management type team of a company, and you do international travel, these are all things that you should definitely know. And I would even take it one step further, is that regional security officer, they call them RSOs for short, having contact with them. Yeah. You can shoot them an email. Usually it's RSO at whatever embassy or consulate it is. Ask them what's going on. They have a really good grasp on what's going on in that country. You can also visit state.gov.
I was just getting ready to say the State Department puts out intel reports for every country that that you can travel to. So,
and right now most of them are red. They're do not travel due to COVID. So that's something I look at weekly for some of our clients that we have. So those are just little steps. Reach out to the State Department, follow what's going on in the State Department, go to the country's local news, go to the city's local news, do a little bit of research. It could save you a lot of pain and trouble in the long term. So, all right. You want to talk about some other survival type tips there, Will?
So, like I if you do get yourself caught in the protest, you want to make sure that you, like I said before, you keep to the edge where it's safest. Try not to be identified as a demonstrator, right? Keep away from the leaders, the agitator. Try to break off as soon as you can. Don't run, walk. You don't want to draw attention to yourself, right? So just kind of start hanging back, slow. And when you get a chance, get out of there. If you can't leave, might want to find a building or someplace to shelter in place, public library or something, I don't know, just something to get away. If you do find yourself caught in a protest and you really can't escape, make sure you're not standing in front of like a glass front store or something like that, just to kind of protect yourself from any flying objects and glass.
I think you brought up a good point. And we said it a few times here, staying on the fringes. And we're not just talking protests, but even other large, you could even apply that same to concerts, right? Where it's not seated concerts. India, I think last year had a trampoline, thousands of people at an event. I can't remember the event exactly, but numerous people were trampled to death. And if you're on the fringes, it's a little bit easier just to get out of the way and let the mass herd kind of pass through that center there. So that's another glass windows, right? We're seeing how many are we seeing right now broken nightly here. So and now, I would also say here, coming back to, and this is the whole reason why we did this podcast this week, was due to our current events. I think that's one thing that we like to kind of tie in. We normally have an outline that Will does about a month or so out. And sometimes we shuffle things around to stay up with current events for our listeners. You see someone lighting a firecracker or any type of like pyrotechnic type stuff, get as far away from them as possible.
Yep.
You know, the luckiest thing you'll probably get is a rubber bullet or some tear gas. But you could have, uh, that young kid who is just
He just wants to cause
stressed out,
trouble.
sketchy, and
Yep.
it could lead to something a lot worse than a rubber bullet or tear gas.
Yep.
So get away from those types of agitators. Uh, Whether you agree with the cause or not, um, it's usually not going to end too well for you. So
Yeah.
being a cop, Will, I mean, you talked about the nightclub, and when you are restraining people, let's say, hey, I went out to let's just do a sporting event, right? So UNC Chapel Hill is not too far away. I remember when they won the national championship, uh, or even it's been a lot longer, about 15 years since the Hurricanes won their national championship, and I was up there for that. But let's say, hey, I'm part of that unruly crowd. Had too many
Stanley
beers.
Cup. It's called the
Oh,
Stanley Cup.
what I call it, the championship.
Your national championship. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously I'm not that big of a hockey follower. I do like watching it, but definitely first hockey game I went to was a few years ago. Um, so the Stanley Cup. Thanks for the correction. But let's say, hey, I've been hanging out with you and Ray too much. You guys spiked my drink. A little toss, a little hammered, feeling like I'm Superman, and now I'm being detained. As a former law enforcement officer, what do you recommend to people? Like, hey, how should I act, or I think most people know that, hey, don't fight them, but what things are you looking for? Because sometimes you may not think you're fighting them, but that body language, the tenseness or something, describe that, and how people, if they do get caught up, how they should act.
Well, so most people are going to resist somewhat because they don't know what's going on. And my suggestion is, listen, you can figure it out later. Don't put yourself in a worse situation than you're already in. Just do what you're told. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Don't say why. What's going on? Just do it. Uh, Most people don't realize it, but there's passive and active resisting. Active resisting is where you're fighting and running, stuff like that. Passive is more when you're tensing up and just kind of, you can't really tell from the outside looking in that people are resisting, but you're trying to get somebody's hands behind their back and they're resisting you and tensing up, and as a police officer, you don't know if they're getting ready to throw a punch at you, if you're going to try to steal your gun. And so that's where I just always suggest, do what just listen, and then you'll figure it out later. Now, I know there's a part of me that says, well, if I didn't do anything wrong, then it's an illegal arrest. I want to resist. And I get that. I really do. But you're just going to make it worse for yourself, because if you start resisting and fighting, it's not going to end well, And
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
so yeah.
So basically, everything we've been taught and told, just comply, and
Yeah.
you can figure it out later. So
Yeah. So
I know we
what
mentioned.
would you, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, what would you suggest to businesses out there how to protect? Because we've been talking about personal, so let's kind of discuss businesses a little bit. Like, I own a business and you work for a business, so what could we do to protect our businesses from, let's say, possible protests that may or may not turn into a riot?
So I think just be prepared. We talked about prepared, but what does that preparedness look like, right? What are you going to have? Sheets of plywood and screws, decking screws to screw in to secure your storefront? Are you going to have concertina wire and fencing there? No, probably not. Uh, Nothing is worth losing your life over either. A lot of businesses are small businesses like yours. Is your business worth losing your life over? No, they let them take it. Is it going to hurt? Sure. Is it a shot to the ego and that pride? 100%. But sometimes it's better, if it gets to that point, walk away. There's been numerous stories in the news lately of business owners shot and killed.
Retired police officer down in St. Louis.
Yeah, a captain there. It's tragic. So recommendation is, let them have it. As hard as that is to do, and I know, I used to get paid for confrontation, and there's times I would say that I actually enjoy confrontation, and I think that's that mentality of a law enforcement / military person. However, at what cost? So
Yeah.
look at that cost. Is it really worth it? And do I think any of these business owners that were shot, killed, or severely injured um, wouldn't have walked away? Maybe they were trying to. We don't know the whole story. They're probably there to protect their business, doing the right thing, and it could just be that agitator on the other end who was already being a clown and just took it, crossed the line even further than the line they already crossed. So for business, be prepared as much as you can be. Again, look at the news, look at social media, get a sense. I would say you are already part of that community. You're already there, so you should have insight as to what the community is doing. Um, a lot of these communities right now, the police can't respond,
Yeah.
and so um, if it's a peaceful protest, you have nothing to worry about. Maybe one way of whether you agree with that protest or not is you can still support them. Maybe have water out there. You can do other stuff to help people stay on your side. But and then if it gets to where it's at right now here in the U.S., I've a lot of these high end stores have hired armed guards
Yep.
and unarmed guards, and you're starting to get heat in some of the cities that have certain gun laws where armed guards they are permitted, but you have to clear it and other things. There was a story yesterday in Chicago of an armed guard and said he worked for a company and the company's kind of disavowing them. But so that goes to the company vetting that guard service, knowing who that guard service is, doing your own background research on the guard service. Are they licensed in your state? And if your city has certain restrictions, are they licensed in your city? So definitely go with an armed guard service that's been vetted and trusted. Talk to your buddies and even your competitors out there who use a guard service. Uh, and then, once it starts going to that tipping point of becoming violent, that's when you look at stuff. What can you do? Talk to your local law enforcement. Hey, and your city council. What can you do to protect your business?
Yep.
Can you put up no climb fencing with concertina wire on top? Can you bolt that into the ground? Can you bolt it to your side of your building? Do you want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
What does your insurance look like legally? What can you do? So there isn't, I'm sure some people are like, hey man, just give me I want a clear cut answer. There isn't a clear cut answer. There's so many different variables that are out there with laws and statutes and other things out there that you have to do that research on yourself because every city is independent of each other and have their own laws. But a guard service is a guard service, and if you hire them at a one time because of the violence that are going on, expect to pay more.
Yep.
If you are a small mom and pop store that's doing really well, but the store, you have a Walmart down the street who has a constant guard service. When they ask that guard company for more support, that Walmart, well, they're probably going to pay a different price than you, who they know it's going to be one and done.
Yep.
And again, what's your insurance look like as well?
So the big thing I think is, I have a plan. You get everything depend. At any core of the prevention is planning, right? So you got to have the plan in place. So one thing that I know is check your insurance. Contact your insurance company. Say, hey, listen, am I covered for this? What exactly am I covered for? Can I increase it? And see, a lot of times, insurance companies have those things where, oh no, within a certain window and stuff like that. So find out what your insurance company allows you to do and what they'll cover. One thing I read was possibly put some cameras up, security cameras. So they may not prevent anything, but it may come back in the end and help you prosecute people who did do damage to your store, the after the fact. Like you said, possibly put up barriers and stuff like that. Get with the property manager, the other store owners in your property, see if you can work out something. Talk to your local government, your local chamber of commerce, see what they suggest. Contact different your law enforcement, stuff like that. Find out what they suggest. Know your local laws and policy, your laws and ordinances, so you're not violating any of them and getting yourself in trouble. And it's hard to walk away from something you've worked your whole life for, and I get that, but like you said, it's not worth your life. And if you have the proper planning and insurance and preparations in place, hopefully you'll survive it, right?
Yeah.
Financially, but
So
I'd
it's
rather
not.
yeah, it's better to live and rebuild than to die trying to save something. I get that, but yeah, on the other hand, I also get where why do I have to give up what I fought my whole life to build because you're an idiot and want to destroy it, you know? So I get both sides of it, but
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge emotional pill you're gonna have to swallow.
yeah,
Yeah, two things and we'll start wrapping it up here in a minute. But two things you mentioned: cameras, right? Cameras, um, they help deter people
yeah,
from coming in, and then they help with the detective process. You know, so and that's if you buy the right cameras.
yep,
Um, so if your cameras don't have the right quality and the right clarity, the police and the law enforcement agencies aren't going to be able to identify that person. So that's one thing. If you're going out and buying that security equipment, know exactly what you're buying. Same with insurance policies. You know, if you call them up, you know, expect it to be like dealing with your car insurance company when you've ruined your vehicle, been in a car accident. And I'm not saying all security companies are bad, and that they're not going to be helpful, because that's not true. But take ownership of your policy. Read it with a fine tooth comb. Understand what the terminology means in each policy. And then finally is, you know, you hear say plan and prepare. So the time to plan and prepare isn't during the crisis.
nope,
You've missed the boat. You're reacting at that point. So plan and prepare now. You know, for what the future is going to hold. You know, look at that insurance policy now, uh, for an event that could happen. Uh, Look at those cameras now, and your security system and everything else now before that event happens. So when it does happen, you can make those small adjustments, not jumping through your hoop and trying to get insurance, trying to get an alarm company and a security camera company to come in and install. I mean, they're slammed right now. Just dealing with their own customers. They probably don't have a whole lot of time to bring on any new customers. So um, plan, and prepare, and be smart. If you're going to go out and participate uh, in the activities of the protest, be smart about it. Know your surroundings. Have an escape backup plan to get out of it. Because right now tensions are high in this country. Doesn't matter what side you're looking at. Everyone's passionate about their thoughts and their feelings. So be smart about it, and stay safe out there. Well, where can everyone find us at?
all right, so please give us a follow, subscribe to our podcast. Just go to coffeesquadpodcast.com and it'll take us to you to our website. You can follow, you can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Panda, or iHeart. You know, we're getting on all the big ones now, so there's like 15 platforms you can listen to us. You can also follow us on Facebook.com. Just search the Coffee Squad Podcast. We'll come up. So you know, let us know what you think. You know, give us your recommendations and your comments, and yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for our listeners. I mean, Will, you had a quick fact for me yesterday of where our listeners are coming from. I think it's, you know, a handful of different countries out there, and
I think we're up to 19 different countries where people have downloaded our podcast and listened to now. So yeah,
so thank you to our listeners.
we're a
Stay
worldwide
safe.
phenomenon.
Stay safe. Have a great week. We'll catch you later.
All right, thanks, guys.